Have you ever noticed how, weeks after listening to a speech, you may forget certain statistics, definitions, and even most of the speech itself, and yet you still remember a single resounding story? Perhaps it was something personal, maybe something historical, something small that illustrated a much bigger and much more complex idea. Whatever it was, that story stayed with you. Stories have been proven to do something to you on an emotional and subconscious level, something that plain facts tend to overlook. So in this video, I want to discuss exactly why incorporating stories and practicing storytelling is extremely beneficial for your next form of communication, and more importantly, how to effectively harness storytelling to use it as a tool for the better. So to start, we are faced with an important question. Why do stories matter so much? Imagine I told you that communication is important. Now that's a perfectly reasonable statement. Nobody can argue with it. It states the point clearly. But if I were to ask you roughly a week from now about what I just said, the odds are that you most likely forgot. And that's natural, because our lives are filled with thousands of resounding statements. It becomes immensely difficult for one specific statement to make a change in your life. But replace that statement with a story. Perhaps instead of merely stating that communication is important, I tell a brief story on an individual who fails to communicate effectively and therefore is set back, whether it be personally or professionally. That story I just told, that comprehensive sequence of events, carries significantly more weight than if I had just stated a plain fact or statistic. Because once you incorporate storytelling in public speaking, the audience remembers you. Think about your childhood. You would naturally remember stories told, perhaps from parents or loved ones, or maybe even books you read yourself. Compare that with merely learning facts, perhaps in school. Which one did you enjoy better? I would say that in most cases, you would have likely enjoyed the stories better than learning plain old facts. And this is because stories provide the mind with a comprehensive sequence of events that can better help improve and enrich your next speech. The importance of storytelling transforms plain ideas into impactful moments in which your audience has a stake in. Another reason as to why stories are so powerful is because they capture valuable attention. Think about how people begin conversations. Very few people will start off by listing facts. Very often they'll say something like, "You'll never believe what just happened to me today." Or perhaps something like, "Do you want to hear what I did last week?" Those statements automatically start the flow of a story, which in turn empowers the conversation and drives attention. Storytelling is used oftenly on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. Think back to the last time you had a conversation with a friend or family member. Very likely, if you analyze it enough, either one of you told a story during that conversation, And it was that story that sparked your interest and gave your mind a reason to store it in your conscious memory. Because immediately, when you're able to activate the curiosity of your audience, it becomes immensely easy to be able to extend on and to better deliver those ideas. Stories can also, arguably, help explain complex ideas in a simple, compact manner. Sometimes we try to explain ideas using complex methods with different terminologies that are sometimes unfamiliar to our audience. For instance, if you were to be a data scientist or a computer programmer or hacker, you would likely include jargon or wording that is completely foreign to your unsuspecting audience. Even if the audience may have some idea on what it is you're trying to say, your ideas may not be communicated as effectively. On the other hand, incorporating those ideas into a sort of story doesn't have to be a stereotypical once upon a time story. A story is defined as merely conveying a sequence of events. Perhaps if you're trying to explain something complex and maybe even distant to the audience, you would incorporate those ideas into a comprehensive sequence of events that evolves around your experience and thereby explain those ideas in a simple, relatable manner. Or another thing you can do is simply remember this key fact. People never remember information. They remember meaning. Think about to every fact you know. Addition, subtraction, history, science. Do you know it because of the sheer facts and knowledge? Or do you remember it because of its meaning? Maybe you had to learn history for a class or exam in your school. Maybe you had to learn math so you can earn an award or simply pass your class. Our mind is systematically programmed to remember only those things which carry a meaning, purpose, or weight. In public speaking, very often it is our job as speakers to incorporate meaning into our words. You have to make your audience care, so in turn, they are more likely to stay actively engaged and therefore more likely to remember and comprehend your ideas weeks after you deliver your presentation. Now, it's important to recognize the fact that not every speech needs a long story. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes made by speakers is overusing stories that go far too long. At the end, your audience has an attention span. Your story should be crafted so that it comprehensively covers the main points in the most engaging way possible, taking up the least amount of time. That is the key towards weaving a story into your communication or your speech. People will only remember stories if they are short, memorable, and contain worthwhile information. That is your job as a speaker. Because when you've experienced all this, when you listen to a speaker tell an interesting story about a personal anecdote, possibly a statistic, or maybe a historical example, and you go on for too long, by the end of it, your audience will have forgotten the original purpose. You have to ask yourself a key question. If I were to remove the story from my speech, would my main idea become weaker? We see it all the time in writing. Very often when we write research papers, we have our opening and lines of evidence. Those pieces of evidence, or in terms of public speaking, those pieces of your story have to relate but only enhance your presentation. Otherwise, they risk becoming repetitive, far-flung, difficult to understand. People often assume they need to have extraordinary experiences or emotional hooks simply to include a story within their speech. That's not true. Sometimes the best stories are those that are ordinary, because oftentimes it is those stories that make you as a person, not you as a speaker, you as a person, feel relatable. Our lives are built not off of extraordinary events, but on relatable anecdotes. And your job as a communicator, speaker, whether it be an interview, a presentation, a formal delivery, is to weave those stories into your form of communication. And even small moments can communicate complex ideas, as long as your story has a purpose. Storytelling is one of the most important aspects of public speaking. And if you feel you enjoyed this video and do in fact understand the power of storytelling, and maybe even want to learn it in more detail, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Next video, we'll be covering how to effectively close a speech so you don't have to be grappling for far-flung rhetorics or complex endings. Otherwise, have a great day.